Góðkvöldið. Jæja, svo sem stígur hérna á svið, hún þarf svo sem ekki á mikilli kynningu að halda. Hún heimsþekkt feministi, hún blaðamaður, rannsóknarblaðamaður af stærð sem við höfum ekki séð áður. Að fara yfir 450.000 blaðsíður, setja saman teymi af 3.250 vísindamönnum til að koma einhverju skýrri niðurstöðu hvað var í skjölunum náttúrulega bara kraftaverk. Og ég ætla ekki að eyða meiri tíma, þeir náttúrulega ekki að bíða eftir mér, þeir að bíða eftir henni. Gjörðu þið svo vel, takkið mér á móti Naomi Wolf, gjörðu þið svo vel.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. We've got a beautiful audience, Gunnar. Oh, thank you so much for welcoming me to Reykjavík. It's a place I've wanted my whole life to visit. I feel incredibly privileged to be here. We've been so warmly welcomed, my husband Brian, who's in the audience, and I. And it is a truly, profoundly moving, magical, poetic culture, landscape, people. I'm honored to be with you. And also, I want to just specially thank you for being here with me live, physically, because if you're here, it means you somehow heard about this, right? And braved whatever you had to brave to be here tonight. There's a lot of censorship around the world, and I just think it takes special kind of courage and thoughtfulness and critical thinking for you to be sitting here in this audience live with me. So I just want to thank you. And now I'm going to jump right in. Shall I? Yes. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to start with, well, it's going to be a journey, and I do want to warn you, we're going to talk about some difficult things tonight, but it's going to be like going into deep, profound, difficult material, and then I promise I'll bring you somewhere good. Okay, so bear with me. But I want to talk about what happened to me personally before I talk about the Pfizer Papers, which is why you're here. So I, had a really comfortable life until July 9th of 2021. I don't know if you're familiar with my work, up until that point, but I was well known around the world for 40 years as a feminist nonfiction writer, a writer about women's issues, women's health, specifically sexual and reproductive health, women's empowerment, politics, and also I wrote books about civil liberties and civil rights and threats to liberty, notably my 2008 book, The End of America. And I mention this because I feel like what I'm going to share with you tonight is very much in total alignment with the whole rest of my mission for my whole lifetime as a writer and as an advocate for liberty. And feminism is a flavor of liberty, right? But I feel that way. But many people think that my views changed, and they really didn't. But this is what happened. I had a great life, 9 bestsellers. I was a Rhodes Scholar. I'd been an advisor to President Clinton's re-election campaign, and then Vice President Gore's presidential campaign. We lived in Manhattan. We went to, we were the B-list of A-list parties. It was very, very comfortable in the kind of Northeastern media elite, I'll just say. And I wrote for every major news outlet, and I appeared on every major sort of Western television, whatever current affairs program. I had 4 columns, over the course of my career. And yeah, it was a really easy, comfortable life. And then on one day, it all changed. So on that one day, July 9th, 2021, it all ended because I posted exactly the same kind of thing I've been writing about for my whole career. I posted on then Twitter post explaining that women were reporting menstrual problems upon receiving the mRNA injection for COVID that had been then rolled out. Now, as a feminist, this is like the DNA of feminism, you know, and for me as a writer on women's issues, this is the beginning of all of my biggest and most important stories, right? When women started saying they were having autoimmune problems when they had breast implants, or when women started to say they were having problems from the intrauterine device. When women tell the truth about their bodies, or anorexia and bulimia, which was the subject of my first big bestseller, The Beauty Myth, when women tell the truth about their bodies, they usually don't have any reason to lie, especially if it's something really difficult and embarrassing, like menstrual symptoms. So, like I used to say, the tenet of my religion as a feminist is, when in doubt, listen to women. So women were giving eyewitness accounts of their own bodies. And so I posted, women are reporting menstrual problems upon receiving the mRNA injection, something like, needs more investigation. Literally everything changed. I was immediately canceled, kicked off of Twitter, kicked off of Facebook, kicked off of YouTube, kicked off of every platform on which I appeared at that time. I was, every door shut against me in my career. Editors, publishers who had published me for decades I didn't exist to them. They wouldn't respond, they wouldn't, like I was an invisible person. An investor in my company withdrew a 6-figure investment, and kind of more interestingly, around the world, and I didn't even understand how this was possible, all at the same time, my bio changed in like 132 languages all at once, from Rhodes Scholar, nonfiction writer, bestsellers, you know, advisor to a president and vice president. It changed to conspiracy theorist, like everywhere all at once. To this day, if you Google me, right, the first 3 pages are probably, as a colleague of mine said, reasons not to read Naomi Wolf. So at that time, AI hadn't been rolled out, so I didn't even understand this. But basically, my career as a writer was over. My career as a legacy media, well-known left-wing commentator was over. But the people who wanted to talk to me were a whole different group of people. And the only people who wanted to talk to me because they wanted to know what was happening to women and fertility, and by extension to babies, because it's not rocket science to consider that if women are having menstrual problems, it could affect their fertility, were conservatives and libertarians. And so I spent the next 2.5 or 3 years talking to conservatives, libertarians, anyone who would listen to me in the independent media space. And I made a lot of new friends, but it was a very striking change in my life. What happened then was that Steve Bannon, whom I had been taught to believe was literally the devil, right, because he was on the other end of the spectrum politically, invited me onto his show, and he wanted to know what was happening with women and babies, and I told him what I knew, and then he, on air, referenced what was then taking place, which was the release due to a successful lawsuit by an attorney named Aaron Siri against the US Food and Drug Administration, and just as you imagine, its job is to make sure our food and drugs are pure and safe. Aaron Siri had successfully sued the FDA to release 450,000 internal documents that were in their custody from Pfizer's internal trials of the mRNA injection and the post-marketing evidence, right? What happened after the rollout. This was now 2023. So we both knew as journalists that this massive tranche of really newsworthy primary source material was at risk of being lost to history because it was so voluminous and so technical that no reporter could read through it and also understand it. So Bannon said on the air, of course you're going to crowdsource a project to read through these documents, a group of experts. And of course I said yes, because I had to. And then, having never done anything like that in my life. And so that's how this extraordinary project began. And what happened after that, kind of call went out for experts, was one of the most amazing things ever to happen in, I think, journalistic history. Because 3,250 highly credentialed doctors and scientists responded and volunteered for the next 2.5 years to read through these documents and to issue what are now 109 reports, 2 books that we published containing these reports, and they told the world what was in the Pfizer documents. And these people ranged from very distinguished cardiologists, anesthesiologists, oncologists, the sports medicine physician who treated the Angels and the Lakers, very famous sports teams in the United States, epidemiologists, medical fraud investigators, biostatisticians, clinical biologists, lab clinicians, every kind of expert you would possibly need to understand what these documents were saying. And they did it for no money, just for the good of humanity and also for the good of science and medicine, because this was a massive experiment that had been rolled out on most of the human population in the world. So what is in the Pfizer documents? Unfortunately, they found the greatest crime against humanity in recorded history. And I don't say that lightly, because I'm the granddaughter of a woman who lost many siblings in the Holocaust, but just in terms of scale of deaths and disabilities and injuries and sterilizations, it is a greater crime than the Holocaust. So what they found was many, many, many shocking lies had been told to people to get them to accept this injection, in addition to unlawful coercive mandates. I believe you didn't have mandates like you have to get injected or lose your job here in Iceland, but many countries did around the world, and there were many other kinds of coercion, I gather, here in Iceland. For instance, number one, within a month, Pfizer concluded that the vaccines did not work to stop COVID. And in fact, by November of 2020, a month after the rollout, Pfizer concluded that the injections revealed vaccine failure, their words, and failure of efficacy. They didn't work. Indeed, I'm glad you're seated for this, the third most common side effect in the Pfizer documents is COVID. Thank you for understanding. And so what you've got to understand is that everything that followed, the two-tier society in which I, in New York, as an unvaccinated person, couldn't enter a restaurant to eat a meal with my children. I had to eat in the street like an animal. The people who lost their jobs, the people who couldn't travel, the people who were just shamed by their neighbors or reported to the authorities by their neighbors. The fear, the isolation, all of it was based on a lie. The vaccines did not work to stop COVID. And in fact, the only way Pfizer could claim, and I'm sure you heard this because this was the same script rolled out around the world in the same timeline, but remember when you were told it's 95% effective, I'm guessing that happened in Iceland because it happened everywhere else, and that you're more likely to get seriously ill or die or be hospitalized with COVID if you're unvaccinated than vaccinated? Did they say that to you in Iceland? Well, the only way they could make these claims is by Pfizer illegally concealed the deaths of 8 people who were vaccinated who died with COVID, in order to get that math to work. If they had properly reported the deaths, as they were legally mandated to do, they would have had to tell you very early on, before the mass rollout of the injections, that in fact, what we now know to be true, you're more likely to get seriously ill, be hospitalized, or die with the injection than unvaccinated. So again, another massive lie. You are probably told, let me guess, and I've done no research on this, I'm just guessing because this was true around the world. I've done no research unique to Iceland about what your public health authorities told you about side effects, but they probably said something like, you might have fever, fatigue, pain at the injection site as side effects. Does that sound? All right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's been true literally throughout the West, the same statements, misstatements. In fact, Pfizer knew, and when I say Pfizer knew, it means the FDA knew, it means the White House knew, and by the same token, all over the world where Pfizer was rolled out, their public health authorities, Health Canada, National, NHS in Britain, your public health authorities no doubt knew, because they all had the same internal information, that the real side effects were, for instance, 1,225 deaths in 3 months of the rollout. And these are deaths reported by the doctors to Pfizer, that their patients died. So the doctors saw the cause effect. In addition, the #1 actual side effect in the Pfizer papers is myalgia, which is muscle pain. How many people do you know who just feel bad? Show of hands after receiving, muscle pain. Don't know why, doctors can't find out, achiness, fatigue. #2 is joint pain. How many people have loved ones or friends or family members who in the last 3 years, broken ankles, broken shoulders, arthritis, hip replacement, knee replacement, anybody? Especially young, healthy people? Okay, many people. And I mentioned the third most common is COVID. However, also in the Pfizer papers are pages and pages and pages and pages and numbers at industrial scales, tens of thousands, actually 143,000 called SAEs, serious adverse events. And what are they? Heart damage, blood clots, blood damage, thrombotic thrombocytopenia, blood clots, lung clots, leg clots, clotting disorders of all kinds, heart damage like tachycardia, myocarditis, pericarditis, enlargement of the heart, heart attacks, strokes, florid neurological symptoms. And now we know why, because of my team of experts, the lipid nanoparticles that encase the mRNA that deliver it all over the body degrade every membrane in the human body, but they also degrade the myelin sheath of the nerves. And in fact, just an aside, I personally didn't take the mRNA injection or the Pfizer injection early. I didn't take any COVID vaccine because I actually have a neurological condition and I understand how nerves work. And I read the Moderna website and they were boasting, this goes to every cell in the body. Boasting, like a pitch to investors. And I was like, every cell? Like your nerves, your ovaries, your eyelashes, your lungs? Like, how's that gonna work? And I knew enough about nerve conduction to think that's really tricky to alter the myelin sheath of the nerves because it conducts electricity, right? And so that's why I passed. And sure enough, lipid nanoparticles degrade the myelin sheath of nerves. How many people do you know who have tremors, dementias, Alzheimer's, Bell's palsy, Guillain-Barré, so many florid neurological events, and of course the doctors are baffled. It's all in the Pfizer documents. Parkinson's. I see the vaccine tremor from far away these days in young people, young healthy people. We've never seen it before. We know why now. How many people do you know who have had mood changes or even personality changes? Show of hands, please, upon receiving the injection. Very baffling, right? Do people you know or love Are they more prone to anger, have less filter, say hurtful things, have trouble with nuanced thinking? They're more binary, less critical in their thinking? Some hands are going up. Yeah, very distressing, right? Well, now we know why. The lipid nanoparticles traverse the blood-brain barrier and actually cause brain damage to the prefrontal cortex. Not in everybody, but this is a side effect. And so what is the prefrontal cortex? It's where we reason. It's where we have nuanced thought, gray areas. It's where we have our filter, don't say that mean thing. Well, when that's damaged, it's the kind of reptile brain that expresses more, rage, binary thinking, impulsivity, and so on. Other side effects, industrial scale skin disorders of all kinds, inflammatory disorders of all kinds, arthritis, I mentioned joint pain because that's inflammatory, eye damage of all kinds, kidney damage, liver damage, abundant, quite terrifying, serious disorders, not just fever, fatigue, and soreness. Another huge lie. Do you guys remember, were you told in Iceland that the injection materials would stay in the deltoid? They knew they were lying about that. In fact, the Pfizer Papers show, meaning your health authorities knew, that, and I really hope I don't get detained when we try to leave Iceland while I tell you this. We keep being detained, by the way, when we cross borders, but not yet in Iceland. The health authorities knew that the injections biodistribute throughout the human body. So what does this mean? I mentioned that the mRNA and the spike protein are encased in lipid nanoparticles, this industrial fat. And you can order it over the internet. It's made in China, of course, and we'll get to the role of China at the end of this talk, but it's also encased in polyethylene glycol, which is a petroleum byproduct, right? It's an antifreeze, right? So these are the materials that are being injected in people. Now, they don't stay in the deltoid. They biodistribute, and Pfizer has a chart showing this. Over time, the chart goes down about the materials in the deltoid and up showing biodistribution in other organs over time. And they only followed this for 2 weeks, so it could continue to biodistribute. So it accumulates in the liver, the adrenals, the lymphatic system, the spleen, crosses the blood-brain barrier, as I mentioned, and if you're a woman, it accumulates in your ovaries. And indeed, nurses are telling me that when women, otherwise healthy childbearing age women, are having abdominal surgery, not even related to their ovaries, they're seeing these blocked ovaries. Well, Pfizer knew that that would happen. The injection rolled out is not the one that was approved by the FDA. There was a bait and switch, believe it or not. Pfizer knew in May of 2021 that the injection damaged the hearts of minors, teenagers and young adults. Indeed, by April of 2021, the Israeli Ministry of Health and a pediatric doctors association had warned the White House in my country that minors' hearts were being damaged and young adult men were having heart damage from the injection, myocarditis and pericarditis. And instead of stopping everything in April and May of 2021 related to young, healthy adults and teenagers, calling a press conference and saying, "We are so sorry, don't ever inject your teenager, your young adult, they're not at risk, causes myocarditis." The White House, we FOIA'd it, meaning we made a request, a Freedom of Information Act request through a lawyer, and we got every mention of myocarditis in email communications at the level of the White House in that period of time. And what we saw was that when the White House and the CDC, Dr. Walensky, our Center for Disease Control in charge of the vaccine promotion, and the Health and Human Services, the heads of these organizations, plus 15 White House staffers, and a template raising it to POTUS, meaning very possibly Joe Biden himself, instead of telling us what was happening, they had a frenzied email communication about covering it up. And they actually created a 17-page document, which is a script, to downplay the risks of myocarditis and heart damage to young men and teenagers, and it's completely redacted, meaning blacked out. You can't read it. We're appealing that now with the new administration. But they knew they were hurting young adults and teenagers, and they knew the vaccine didn't work, and they chose to cover it up. And in fact, that whole summer, I don't know if this happened in Iceland, it happened all over the West, that whole summer into fall, knowing what they were doing to healthy young kids and adults, they did an influencer campaign all over social media encouraging teenagers and young adults to get the injection, knowing what they were doing. Pfizer hired 2,400 extra staffers by the first few months of the rollout to deal with the flood of reports of serious adverse events that they knew they would be getting. But what I really want to tell you above all of this is that these side effects, these harms, are not the centerpiece of the Pfizer documents. Even as you know, finding a way to make the vaccines effective isn't even a centerpiece of the Pfizer documents. They knew it wasn't effective. The centerpiece of the Pfizer documents is a 360-degree attack on human reproduction. And now this is really weird when you think about it, because COVID ostensibly is a respiratory disease, right? It's airborne, it comes through your mucous membranes, it infects your lungs. The very serious things that kill you tend to be respiratory. But there's almost nothing in the Pfizer documents about mucous membranes, breathing, oxygen levels, lungs, almost nothing about respiratory infection. The centerpiece, again, over and over and over, is about how to disrupt human sexual fertility in men and women. So you recall that in June or July of 2021, I was deplatformed for noting that women were having menstrual problems. Well, Pfizer knew that women would have menstrual problems because there's actually a chart, and to me as the granddaughter of someone who lost so many loved ones in the Holocaust, this is a very striking document. It's a chart that has multiple cells, and it shows tens of thousands of women damaged through multiple instances of menstrual, I'm not even going to say disorder, like disability. Women's lives being ruined by destroying their menstrual cycles. For example, 15,000 women bleeding every day, 10,000 women having 2 periods a month, 7,500 women with no periods at all now after the injection, meaning totally infertile. And then there are lines like 85-year-old women who bleed upon receiving the injection, 10-year-old girls who menstruate for the first time upon receiving the injection, women losing, sorry to upset people, it's gross and distressing, losing their uterine linings, women hemorrhaging, women passing tissue in ways women have never bled before. Pfizer knew they were doing this to women, and they just make this Mengele-type chart showing these horrific effects on women's lives. And not just women's lives, but their whole families, their relationships, you can imagine, but certainly their fertility. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a DPhil in English literature. But I took 8th grade biology, and I know that if women are reporting menstrual damage in 2023, there's going to be fertility issues in 2025. And that's exactly what we're seeing, and they knew that it would happen. Pfizer knew that the lipid nanoparticles blocked ovaries, but they do more than block ovaries. And the blocked ovaries could be one cause of some of these catastrophic menstrual problems women are having, which also means hormonal problems. But a fetal maternal medicine specialist, one of the few brave gynecologists to speak up, or obstetricians, showed me images of ultrasounds that showed damage to placentas from the lipid nanoparticles. Because again, what's a membrane? A placenta is a membrane. So the lipid nanoparticles degrade the membrane. So it's creating calcifications in the placentas of pregnant women that prevent nutrients and oxygen from reaching the babies. And the other thing that's happening because of this impairment of placentas is that the placentas aren't growing big enough to deliver full-grown babies. And so babies are being delivered prematurely. Not only that, but the placentas are not normal upon delivery. And again, this is not everyone, but this is happening in ways that it never happened before. Multiple midwives in different places, and I stress this because as a journalist, when you have two different people who are unrelated reporting the same thing, that's confirmation, showed me that placentas that used to be, I mean, I'm sorry to be graphic, but comfortable, cushy, well supplied with blood and like thick, I guess I'm trying to say, comfortable places for a baby to grow are now flattened like pancakes and barely able to nurture babies for 8 months. And they've sent me images of these placentas, and unsurprisingly, maternal deaths in childbirth in the West are up by 40% because these placentas fall apart. Women hemorrhage when they're trying to give birth. So we're back to kind of a pre-20th century kinds of risks in childbirth now for women. That's not all. Pfizer knew that they were killing babies in utero that were already conceived. I was in the news. The only time legacy media reported on this incredibly important research project, literally the only time, was when one of our volunteers miscounted miscarriages in one section of Pfizer documents, and she concluded that there was a 44% miscarriage rate. This made it to Reuters, it made it to your social media, I gather, it made it around the world as a huge cause célèbre. They made a mistake, discredit the whole project. Well, we recounted and submitted it to other kinds of checks, and also gave it to Dr. Pierre Corey to reanalyze. And in fact, the 44% was not right. The correct figure was 80%. But did Reuters ever correct that? Did your social media here in Iceland ever correct that and say, oh, sorry, it wasn't 44%, it was 80%? No, they did not. But we linked the Pfizer Papers in our report about this. You can see it for yourself. Out of 276 pregnancies, they told women in the study not to get pregnant, but some did. 276 pregnancies, they somehow lost 240 of the records of what happened to the pregnancies. So it could be higher, right? You're elite, that's illegal. You're not supposed to lose the records. But of the 36 pregnancies they followed to term, 34 of the women lost their babies. But Pfizer knew this would happen, and this is where you start to think, as we say in tech, it's not a bug, it's a feature. In other words, that infertility is not a horrible byproduct that's inadvertent of a greedy pharma company, but in fact the point. Because there's an 8-page document called the Pregnancy and Lactation Report, which summarizes the key findings related to pregnancy and lactation. And this was produced in April of 2021. In it, they show that babies who were nursing from vaccinated moms were getting horribly sick. Unsurprising. I mentioned that the lipid nanoparticles in the polyethylene glycol biodistribute into the lymphatic system, right? Well, breast milk is made of lymph from the lymphatic system as well as from blood. And so the lipid nanoparticles were getting into breast milk. And remember, they're covered in polyethylene glycol, a petroleum product. So tiny babies, newborns, are trying to nurse from vaccinated moms and ingesting these toxic materials. So Pfizer has another chart, just like the menstrual damage chart. And this is, again, one of the most like Nazi medicine kinds of things I've seen in my life, and I don't say that lightly, that shows babies getting sick from nursing vaccinated moms. These many babies are vomiting. These many babies have fever. These many babies have edema, which is swelling of their flesh. These many babies are disconsolate, failure to thrive. One poor baby had convulsions and ultimately died of multi-organ system failure from nursing a vaccinated mom. So they knew that they were poisoning breast milk. You may have heard that during the rollout of these injections, the FDA suppressed baby formula, the biggest manufacturer of baby formula, so women didn't really have an alternative to this poisonous milk they were giving their newborns. And you should know that nursing has gone from 34% of all moms and new babies to 14% in the years since the injection was rolled out, because babies are getting sick, moms don't know what's wrong, and so this is a huge intervention. Like, leaving aside the medical stuff, the physical stuff, it's a huge intervention in this primal experience that too few babies were having anyway. Now almost 14% of babies are having the experience of being nurtured by the body of their mother. And even when they can manage it, they're getting sick from nursing their moms. And this document is not all. There are also 2 babies in this report in utero who died. And Pfizer concluded that these babies died from, quote, maternal exposure, end quote, to the vaccine. Dead, just dead. Okay, so 2 more miscarriages. This document went to the White House on April 20th, 2021. It went to Dr. Rochelle Walensky, a woman, a mother. I mean, this is one of the most evil things of this whole story. And instead of giving a press conference immediately and telling the mothers of America and the world, if they were listening, stop, don't take this injection, don't nurse your baby if you're injected, don't do this to this child. She gave a press conference 3 days later from the White House saying, there is no bad time to take this injection before you get pregnant, during your pregnancy, or after your baby is born. And she had this document in her hand that showed this damage to babies and to mothers. Well, that's not all. It didn't just hurt moms and babies. Pfizer told vaccinated men not to have intercourse with women of childbearing age, and if they did, to use 2 reliable forms of contraception. So Pfizer appears to have thought that there was something possibly injurious in the semen of vaccinated men, but to this day they haven't told us what they were worried about or what it is. But they told men to avoid intercourse with, avoid impregnating unvaccinated women. Nonetheless, men are not spared. Andrology journal showed that the mRNA injection suppresses sperm count and sperm motility. But also, Pfizer knew that lipid nanoparticles degrade, what are testicles? They're encased in a membrane. They degrade the membrane around the testes of baby boys in utero of vaccinated moms. So the baby doesn't even have to be vaccinated with this injection to have an effect on his own fertility, right? Because the degradation affects the Sertoli cells and the Leydig cells in the testes. And I didn't know what these were, and I was shocked when I found out. These are the cells in the testes of, boys in utero, then boys, and then adolescent boys, and then, men that switch on masculine secondary sex characteristics. So at adolescence, what we think of as masculinity, broad shoulders, deep voices, facial hair, and fertility, the ability to father children. So we literally don't know if these boys whose moms were vaccinated will grow up in adolescence to turn into normal men. The masculinity hormones have been impaired. Now, unsurprisingly, 3 years later, there's worldwide, but especially in the West, a 13 to 20% drop in live births. Iceland, of course, is almost 100% vaccinated, and the Nordic Times reported that Iceland experienced the steepest birth rate decline since the 1800s in the last few years, and in a country of only about 400,000 people, there are now 500 missing Icelandic babies a year. In Europe, there are 1 million missing babies a year. And this is true, again, this drop in fertility across the West. So why do I keep saying across the West? It's, you know, I've told you a lot of horrible things, and now I need to give you analysis. Why would they do this, right? And not just in my country, in your country, throughout Western Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Well, it is, I've concluded, a biological attack on the West by kind of a consortium of bad actors at a global level. And one thing you should know is that Pfizer isn't a German company. That's what you're told. It's actually a German-Chinese company. And BioNTech, which is the subsidiary of Pfizer, which makes the injection, the COVID injection, created an agreement that Fosun Pharmaceutical, which is one of the biggest Chinese pharmaceutical firms run by the Chinese Communist Party, as all corporations are in China, would produce 1 billion doses of the BioNTech injection, Pfizer injection. However, not for internal use in China. The Chinese population uses a completely different COVID vaccine. These were for export. So Pfizer, Fosun, opened 14 manufacturing plants in Western Europe, 11 in the United States, and in 2021, there's an SEC filing that shows that BioNTech transferred the IP of the Pfizer injection to not a Chinese individual, not a Chinese company. The SEC filing says to China, to the country of China. What this means is that when you take, or when you took, or your loved ones took a Pfizer injection after 2020, in or after 2021, you're taking something that's been formulated, produced, manufactured, packaged, distributed by people who want the West dead, and certainly people who want America dead. And I'm not talking about Chinese people. I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party. And I want to give you some backstory about why I say this, because it's a huge statement. My husband, Brian O'Shea, is a big influence on the China part of my analysis. He was in military intelligence most of his career, and then in the intelligence community. And in like March of 2020, the start of lockdown, he was saying, "This is China." And I'm like, "Honey, I love you, but that is crazy," right? Sounded insane. But he showed me over the next few years, documentation upon documentation, that China's methodology, or I should say the CCP's methodology, is to wage something called unrestricted warfare. And so it doesn't look like what Iceland or the United States or, you know, France or Britain thinks of when we think of warfare. It doesn't look like an invasion. It doesn't look like bombs dropping. It looks like surrounding systems until our country's gone, right? So buying up land. I know that here in Iceland, the Chinese interests tried to buy up land in America. They're buying up land close to military bases, ports, infrastructure, food supply. Our biggest pork producers in America are Chinese owned, buying up food manufacturers across Western Europe and North America. Elite capture, our universities are being funded massively by Chinese communist dollars flowing through cutout organizations. But what this, and you know, the pharmaceutical supply is largely coming from China. And so Brian also showed me that there are plans in place to celebrate the 100 years after the Communist Revolution by China being the world's hegemon. So as he put it about America, China wants our land, they want our water supplies, they want our institutions, they want our infrastructure, they want our manufacturing, they want our natural resources, they don't want our population. And I'm going to say the same thing is true of Iceland, Britain, Canada, France, Australia, New Zealand, all the Western countries that have sustained so many deaths and injuries. And again, I really want to stress, because this is a sensitive subject, I'm the daughter of an immigrant. I'm the granddaughter of immigrants. I believe in legal immigration. However, more than ever, I believe in sovereignty and borders, because clearly, when you understand that this was a bioweapon designed quietly to do what it's doing right now, sterilizing people, killing people, giving people turbo cancers, disabling people. 1 million people a month in America are initially identifying for the first time as disabled, as Ed Dowd pointed out. Then you've got unrestricted warfare, and then bringing in millions and millions of people. This is not a racist thing to say. This is about cultural destabilization, right? And population destabilization. Millions of people from countries like Afghanistan, Yemen, I'm talking about the United States now, rural areas, tribal areas of Pakistan and Britain, people who, you know, all over Central America and countries run by cartels, people who aren't raised with experience of constitutional rights, human rights enshrined in law, rule of law, and equality, like between genders, for instance. You have a replacement population that's easier for oligarchs and globalist predators to control. And so as Ed Dowd, the former BlackRock hedge fund manager, said, with so many people, so many excess deaths, which are being documented all over the West, and so much immigration, illegal immigration from countries that don't have traditions of human rights, parliamentary representation, he said, just wait 5 years. You'll have solved the problem of the West, because you can't establish global feudalism, which is what the horrific cabal, which is not just China, but the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the European Union as a functionary, you know, this kind of alignment, some big tech participation. They want a feudal world. They want a digitally controlled, subjugated, feudalized world, kind of a Marxist oligarchy. And they're obtaining it. Like, Canada's almost gone. Britain's almost gone as a free nation. And so that, I see, is the methodology behind unleashing this bioweapon along with immigration. The last thing I'll say is this was rolled out just a couple of years before we were told about AI. And now we're, you know, the plans are being revealed that AI is going to get rid of 85 out of 100 workers on every factory floor. So these people who want to run the world really don't need human populations anymore. They don't want to look after our elders. They don't want to educate our kids. They don't want to pay for our Social Security. And AI is going to do what we used to do anyway. So that's my analysis of why a bioweapon. So that's really the conclusion of what I have to say. I'm not sure what the time looks like. Maybe someone will tell me if I've been speaking for 50 minutes, which is when I need to stop. And I guess I should now, bring you into the kind of sunshine of hope, because I've just made you want to kill yourselves, no doubt, with this horrible news I've rolled out. I guess to me, going through this journey, it's been very painful personally. And maybe Gunnar will tell me how much more time I've got, or if I've run out of time. I'm okay. All right. Give me the minutes I've got left with your hands so I can pace myself. All right. It's very painful to hear that this happened, and believe me when I say that it's been very painful for me to bring this material to the world, to edit it, to publish it, to bring it to audiences over and over. And now, my life seems to be this very low-tech one of countries like Iceland and Britain and the Netherlands and Australia are so censored around these issues, Canada, that I'm being physically airlifted in to stand in a room like this and talk to humans like you in this kind of 19th century technology of human beings speaking to each other in a room, because that is the only way the information gets out. It's like we're all behind the Iron Curtain now when it comes to this material all over the world. But I have to tell you, because Iceland is being targeted just like Canada, just like the US, just like Britain, for very similar reasons. And I have to tell you because the other thing that going through this kind of valley of darkness, realizing that there's been a massive attack on humanity, leads to is searching for answers and hope, right? I mean, I have loved ones who are vaccinated. My mom, members of my family, she lets me say that, by the way. And I pray for them and pray for them and pray for them, but I'm also so glad that I know what's in the Pfizer documents, because it points the way to some kinds of healing and some kinds of treatment. And I really want to say that to you, because again, this is a very vaccinated country. They're not going to tell you how to heal. Right? One of the reasons there's so much lying, I found out that a major epidemiologist in Iceland is lying to this day, ostensibly, if what I was told yesterday in a podcast is true, about the safety and efficacy of this injection. Your doctors are not going to tell you if you've been vaccine injured, I expect. Doctors in the US don't. Doctors in Canada and around the world don't. Why? A couple of reasons. They don't know. They don't recognize these symptoms. When people present with stroke and liver damage and kidney damage, and by the way, in our liver and kidney report, half the serious injuries happen within 48 hours of the injection. They don't tell you, oh, did you take a booster? Did you take it? Are you vaccinated? They don't know that these are side effects, right? But also, I'm guessing your professional organizations took the money. And your media took the money, just like our professional organizations took the money and our media took the money to lie. In the United States, doctors' organizations took millions of dollars, but the contract, which Dr. Thorpe's wife, who's a lawyer, Maggie Thorpe, found, specified that they can keep the money only if all their doctors stay on script and don't give their patients actual informed consent. What happens if one of their doctors tells their patient, not even don't do it, but just here are the real risks? They have to give the money back. Millions of dollars. So there's a massive crime, a global crime, one of the biggest, mass murder, fraud, coercion, battery, I would say, that took place around the world, and our leaders are complicit, including your leaders. Our public health authorities are complicit, including your public health authorities. Our manufacturers are complicit, including yours. Our media is complicit, especially yours. Gunnar reached out to 20 Icelandic news organizations, podcasts, websites, to see if they wanted to talk to me. No one wanted to talk to me. right? I'm not taking it personally, but this is a news story, right? Even if you're going to say, you're wrong, Naomi, or show me the evidence, you know, this is a news story. What I'm saying to you is newsworthy in Iceland as in my country, and it's crickets from the legacy media, because probably in Iceland, as everywhere else, there was a money flow from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation around the world, from the World Health Organization around the world, and from the CARES Act in my country, $1 billion to overcoming vaccine hesitancy. The media took the money, and so they're complicit in killing people, including in Iceland, I will wager, and that's why you don't hear a peep about it in your media. That's why, are there any journalists here tonight? I mean, what does that say about Icelandic media? I'm sorry. I'm not singling you out. It's exactly the same in countries throughout the West. And also, shame on you, Icelandic media, really. And not singling you out. Shame on Canada, shame on America. So in addition to understanding the mechanics of how the Pfizer injection works, and probably Moderna works the same way, Janssen probably works differently, AstraZeneca has been pulled off the market, safe and effective. I do want to tell you, I want to leave you with some gestures toward healing, right? I've gone deeply into natural remedies, traditional remedies, Ayurvedic remedies, because for thousands of years, people have been healing themselves or helping, and because I don't trust modern medicine now at all for anything, right? I'm trying to stay out of their clutches as long as I can. But one thing you need to think about is inflammation, as I mentioned. So these injections are highly inflammatory. So anything you can do to counter inflammation in your body, you should do it, whether it's red light saunas, you have wonderful sauna traditions here in Iceland, of course, whether it's eating an anti-inflammatory diet, all the things you can do that are anti-inflammatory, avoiding things that are inflammatory, right? Processed foods, etc. The other thing, and these seem like small gestures, but from what I've seen, the damage is systemic, so the help you can give yourselves and your loved ones is also bit by bit systemic, pardon me. The other thing is your lymphatic system, detox, right? You want to keep detoxifying your body. So again, saunas, trampolines, sunshine, fish oil, you know, all the things you can possibly do to detox. And some studies have shown bromelain, curcumin, nattokinase. My poor loved ones, whom I won't name, get monthly shipments of nattokinase from me, from Japan, and they're like, stop with the nattokinase already. But there's some suggestion that those are helpful. But I'm moving now from kind of gestural, healthful things we can do, you know, and also just stay away. If you can get second and third opinions, try to stay away. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not a doctor. I try to stay away from that system because I know the FDA doesn't make sure anything is safe, right? Why should I trust them for anything ever again? But the last thing I want to say is, like, what are we left with? We're left with a massive test, I think, of human beings on this planet. And part of the test was moral, right? Like COVID and lockdowns and masking and then forced injections gave people the chance to decide if they were going to be, you know, in the resistance in 1933 or the people who turned their neighbors in. And I'm sure here in Iceland, you can think of people who tried to resist, even if it was just sharing information, or, you know, colluded with tyranny in this beautiful, free nation with such a tradition of independence and self-determination. And that happened around the West. But I've come to believe very literally in good and evil. And I didn't used to ever talk about my spiritual life. I didn't think it was important. I thought it was not serious to talk about your spiritual life. But now I talk about good and evil every chance I get. I talk about God every chance I get. I'm not embarrassed anymore because I personally think this has been a massive test of humanity involving good and evil. And the evil was too big for humans to have accomplished it alone. You know, there's no way to explain how all these nations, leaders, did the same evil things all at once around the world, even with AI. There's no way to explain it unless there is evil that's bigger than humanity. By the same token, you know, people have shown heroism and kindness and community and a search for truth. People have chosen good. And I think that what was demonstrated by the lockdown years and the mandate years, look at what was targeted. The human body, the human face, right, which is the image and likeness of God in our tradition. I'm Jewish. Children playing, walking in the sunshine, church and synagogue and mosques, community, bowling, sitting in a restaurant with your friends, singing, dancing, weddings, funerals, being with your loved ones when they're dying. What was targeted was everything that makes us human. And I don't think that was an accident. So I think our way of fighting back, among others, is to embrace and insist on protecting and maintaining and celebrating those things that make us human, not letting us be pried away from each other, separated from each other, told we can't touch or hug each other, covering each other's faces against our wills, colluding and capitulating to tyrants. I think that's one thing we've got to have learned if we're going to survive this test. And the other thing I think is that, like, this sounds really very weird, but I happen to read Hebrew, and I've literally gone back and started to read the Bible in Hebrew, the Hebrew Bible, from beginning to end. And what happens over and over, it's very useful for a time like this, is people will F up, pardon my language. They will blow it. They will, you know, go astray, worship things they shouldn't worship, give their babies to Baal to sacrifice in the fire, you know, forget their families, forget to cherish children, as we did, right? And then there will be a correction. And it sometimes is harsh, right? And so I feel like that's been really instructive because we kind of have gone astray. We kind of forgot, I'm not talking about you, but certainly in my culture, in my world, we forgot to cherish our children, cherish our elders, celebrate our freedom, defend our freedom, choose, you know, good lives, do good always, right? Even when we didn't want to and it wasn't comfortable. So I'm not saying I know why this happened, but I'm saying it's given me comfort to know that, like what God explained in the Hebrew Bible, I'm not proselytizing, you believe whatever you want to believe or nothing, I don't care, it's just worked for me, helped me, is that when horrible things can happen, but then when you kind of go back into alignment with divine will, however you experience it, communities are saved, and individuals are saved, and families are saved, and miracles happen. And I do think we need miracles now. So, but I believe in miracles. So on that note, I will leave, probably this is a very secular society, and this is really embarrassing, but I do it every time. I'm going to leave you with Chronicles 7:14, because I found a lot of help in this. And it's a quote, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive them and heal their land." That's it. That's my talk to you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, we got through that. All right, I'm here for your questions. Gunnar, I know you have a method to take questions.
So we have 20 minutes for questions, Q's and A's. There's a microphone here. So if you have any questions, please just stand up and raise your hand and I'll point to one of you to speak. Any questions?
I've made everyone so sad.
I really need to know, when you said that this was an attack on the West, is there anything that suggests that white people are genetically more susceptible to vaccine injuries from this mRNA?
So I try to stay away from race-based questions if I can, or unless there's like immediate facts that need to be addressed. There's nothing like that in the Pfizer documents. Yeah.
Einhverju fleiri með spurningu inn í salnum? Komdu, af því það hefur verið að streyma, takk.
Do you mind if I sit down?
Yeah, please. Hérna, please.
Hi. My family got very sick of these vaccines. And I asked my father to come here and he didn't dare to come.
Pardon me for interrupting. Did you say your family got really sick? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
I'm so
Both
sorry.
my sister and my father.
Sorry.
Yeah. And last year my father, he fell off a horse on gallop very fast. And he is still like recovering from this, but still they have not researched his blood, but his heart is okay. They have looked into his heart and everything about the heart. But what I want to ask about, he took 2 AstraZeneca shots, and I remember the time when the AstraZeneca shots were delivered to European countries and also to Spain, as I remember, at least Spain, Germany, and Denmark are those countries that I remember, and Iceland. As soon as they had delivered the first vaccines of AstraZeneca, they stopped them. They were stopped for a while. And then they came up with these news about blood clots. And this is what my father got. He described this, after the second shot, he described it as he was pissing blood for 5 days in a row after the second shot. And when he told me this, I canceled all my plans to have a vaccine.
Good.
But the same thing happened with my sister. She got 2 Moderna shots, and after the second shot, her tíðir á ensku, hvað? Yeah, menstruations. Her menstruations got all fucked up. She was like, had no tempo in it. The regular tempo was gone. So, but what I want to know is what is causing these, þessi einkenni, these symptoms, these exact symptoms. What is causing this in these shots?
Thank you. I'm so sorry your family's suffering so much, and thank you for asking these questions. I mean, this is how we take care of our families. We try to find out what we can to help them. Can you help me out a little bit with what the speaker was saying.
What I want to know, is this something about the blood? Because he was on a horseback.
Right.
And then just suddenly he
Fell.
just passed out.
Yeah, I can answer that. I'm really sorry. Believe it or not, in the SEC filing, and that's the Securities Exchange Commission in the US, it's the filing, it's a corporate thing, right? When you want to start a company or merge a company, you have to disclose risks of your product. And in the SEC filing, one of the risks is falling from a standing position, collapsing. So this is, and I know multiple people who have suddenly fallen, right? And they can injure themselves badly. One person died after injury, having brain damage upon falling. But it is a known disclosed side effect of the Pfizer vaccine. We haven't studied AstraZeneca. Those documents are not available to us, or Moderna. But yeah, that's why people are, accidents, road accidents, horseback riding accidents, people are collapsing. Happens on playing fields. I don't know if specifically your dad suffered from that, but it's a side effect I've heard of a great deal that was disclosed by Pfizer.
What I've heard about, for instance, about the blood, that the blood loses its ability to take up oxygen.
Right. So, unfortunately, there is truth to that, and what happens is, this is so gross and horrible, but the lipid nanoparticles, remember the stories about, maybe this didn't happen in Iceland, but in the US it did, thank you. These materials have to be kept very, very cold. Did you have that story? Okay, God, it's exactly the same. Well, they have to be kept very, very cold to keep them liquid. And these materials coalesce at room temperature. They clump, they thicken at room temperature. And of course, body temperature is even hotter than room temperature. So the material gets injected and then it thickens the blood, or it can cause clotting. Also, the spike protein can damage the lining of the arteries and cause heart damage, arterial damage that way. That's why I keep talking about circulation being so important, keeping your circulatory system going, your blood flowing, again, nattokinase or whatever, turmeric, whatever you find to keep your blood flowing is very helpful. But that's what so I guess what I'm saying about the blood clots is there are a couple of ways blood gets damaged through these injections. One is the viscosity of the lipid nanoparticles. One is the damage to arteries of the spike protein. And I'm really sorry, but I do know that people are having good results getting treated for vaccine injuries by people like Dr. Henry E. Lee. I should give you a list of people after this, and you can share it on social media. There are really good, innovative physicians in the United States, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Corey, who are treating people with vaccine injuries pretty successfully. But definitely keeping circulation good is critical. And I'm sorry for your family's struggles. I really am. May they recover completely.
Já, við höfum kannski smá tíma fyrir kannski 2 spurningar, þú og Ragnar eða ekki, þannig að bara gera svo vel.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your speech. It was really powerful.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, have you seen any informations in the Pfizer files about shedding between people? Let's say if a husband and a wife and just one of them had the vaccines.
Yeah, this is so heartbreaking, of course. Unfortunately, the answer is yes. And shedding is not that weird if you think of studies of women who share dormitories or women in the military. Their menstrual cycles will align, it's well known, through shedding of things that create hormonal changes. So unfortunately, in the Pfizer documents, Pfizer defines contact with the vaccine or exposure to the vaccine as including skin contact and respiration. And also apparently semen, right? And they're of vaccinated men. And we do have many reports of women, and this actually came out of Israel, where Orthodox women keep very careful track of their cycles and, you know, when they have intercourse with their husbands because of, you know, rituals around that. But unfortunately, women are reporting that they can get very bad cramps, you know, various symptoms from being intimate with their husbands if the husbands are vaccinated and the wives are not. But otherwise, I don't have, apart from those little glimmers of evidence, I don't have thorough information. There are no good peer-reviewed studies, but I know Dr. Corey, Pierre Corey, you really should follow him, is doing studies of shedding. So we know the mechanism. I know that I get sick on planes. My husband gets very sick being in enclosed spaces with vaccinated people. So when Pfizer says respiration is exposure, that makes sense. So I would say, you know, open windows, have good ventilation. But it definitely seems to be a thing. We don't know enough about it.
I'm sorry, I'm cheating a little bit. I just felt the urge to thank you for your fight and for everything. This has been very inspiring and.
Thank you. I'm not sorry. That's really nice of you. Thank you. I always thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I just want to appreciate all of you for doing that, because it's very hard to bring this information to an audience like you and to the global audience. And people have told me when there's this, you know, painful moment after I've shared all of this, it's better to have the truth. And I hope it's better to have the truth, but it's reassuring to me that you still want me to do this because I know it's so difficult. So thank you. Let's keep going. And may I also say, if it's more comfortable for people to speak Icelandic, Gunnar can translate for me, so don't feel obliged to speak English.
Kalli, varst þú ekki með spurningu? Hann ætlar að vera...
Má ég vera undan?
Já, gerðu svo.
Gunni, sæll, takk fyrir þetta frábæra kvöld. Naomi Wolf, ég er með einu spurningu fyrir þig sem að er í sambandi við það sem að kom ekki fram í bókinni en mér finnst vera ferlega áhugavert. Gunni, ertu með mér?
Ég fylgst með þér.
Hefur hérna Naomi Wolf eitthvað lesið eða heyrt kvartanir jarðafara þar að segja þetta fyrirtækja eða funeral services?
So he's asking if you ever noticed, you know, complaints about funeral homes?
Oh, yes.
Funeral services that service, you know, the burials, you know, when people pass away from all kinds of things.
I don't understand complaints.
He's asking, because this is not necessarily in the Pfizer papers, that from the funerals home they're being reported that people have maybe blood clots.
Thank you, Gunnar.
Really?
Or something strange.
Oh, I understand what he's asking about. I understand your question. Yes. So I understand. Funeral home directors and embalmers in multiple countries in the US and in Britain are reporting these white fibrous clots in the veins of about 27% of cadavers, including very young children. And they're very worried about it, they're upset about it. They've tested these fibrous clots. They're not recognizable as anything they've seen in human beings before. My suspicion is that it's an interaction of the lipid nanoparticles with blood or with, you know, human tissue over time, but they're very, very upset about it, and they anecdotally have said that the cadavers that have the fibrous clots tend to be vaccinated with the mRNA injection. I'm sorry. However, they are ostracized by their own professional organizations when they try to call attention to it. But it is definitely happening. Multiple embalmers have shown photographs of these clots and the test results. Yeah. But can I just say about this, like, this is such an example, along with my kind of feeble efforts to point directions that healing can lie. Our governments should be studying these fibrous clots, right? What are they? How can we treat them? Our universities, our hospitals, our scientists, what the heck? Why is it, 80 hippies in a room and me and you? Like, I mean that as a hippie, right? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, why are we talking about this? Our government entities, our universities, our scientists, our labs should be studying these clots and finding out how we can save humanity from them. That's all I want to say about that, but thank you for the question.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been following you, in fact, since you started opening your mouth about this a few years ago.
I didn't catch that. Okay.
And I was, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, sko ég held við ætlum að fá
I'm sorry about not having any questions. So.
No, it's okay, it's okay. So I think við tökum eina spurningu viðbót. Svo ætla Naomi að vera með okkur þetta frammi á eftir fyrirlesturinn og ykkur velkomin að vera, barinn er opið, það er kaffi og te þið viljið. Hún ætlar að vera hérna aðeins frammi og ykkur velkomin að spjalla við hana. En tökum eina loka spurningu áður en við klárum.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you. It's an honor.
I'm curious because a friend of mine, she was pregnant and she took this damned shot when she was 8 months, a little bit over 8 months, gone with her child, and the child died. And then she tried it twice, and she thought that she was permanently damaged, but she now has a 3-month-old. So I was just wondering if you heard of people getting fertile again, or damage. At least she got pregnant again after trying twice.
Thank you.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, she was pregnant and she got the shot while she was 8 months pregnant.
Oh, I see.
And the child died.
The child died.
She miscarried it.
Yeah.
And then she tried twice and nothing happened. And then suddenly she has a 3-month-old.
Are you asking if she can get pregnant in the
No,
future?
she has. I was just wondering how, if you've heard about people getting better or getting fertile again.
Oh, getting fertile again. Oh, that's a great question. Well, that's a great question. Again, something that should be formally studied. The kind of government-sanctioned studies want to say that menstrual dysregulation gets better over time. I'm not persuaded. The studies, the methodologies tend to be very flawed, like they won't follow women for very long, or they won't use a big sample, or they look at some things and not others. So I'm just going to say we don't know. Unfortunately, the best information I can give you is about Canada, where my colleague Amy Kelly studied government databases about fertility, and that shows maybe some good news because there was a drop 2021, 2022, and then it went a little bit back up. But that's just not enough evidence. Something I don't like, and again, shame on you, Icelandic government, is that your government has stopped tracking these issues. I tried to find this question of fertility, drops in fertility, or rising rates of fertility in Iceland. They stopped recording it publicly after 2020. So that's not acceptable. You need transparency, and I'm sure in your legal system, government data belongs to you. It doesn't belong to the government. So I don't know enough about the answer, but from one country, just Canada, but it was a big sample, it looks like it dipped and then rose a little bit. So God willing, right? But don't let her get any more injections. Okay.
She didn't listen at first.
She did?
No,
She did not
She
listen.
did not listen.
But maybe no more, right? Maybe
Yeah,
she'll
but
listen now.
it was very, very hard
Yeah.
bringing it to her that it might.
So
or
hard. Yeah, I know.
That was the reason, because
Yes.
she knew about it and did it anyway. So
Right. It's so painful.
It's very tragic. Yeah.
I mean, thank you for being a good friend. One of the things we really haven't talked about is how this issue has divided families, divided friendships, heartbreaking. I mean, that could be a whole other evening, but there is some hope because booster take-up in the United States is like 3%, and children are not being vaccinated with this injection. Like, very few children now are being vaccinated, at least in the US. Brazil withdrew the injection from children after our volunteers presented to the Brazilian parliament. And there's a very interesting reaction where parents have stopped, and I'm not telling you what to do, but parents have stopped over-vaccinating their kids in general. So maybe a silver lining is the next generation might be spared a lot of health effects of the kind of excessive vaccination of the last generation or two. In the United States, there's 72 vaccines on the childhood schedule. I'm 62, and when I was a kid, there were 3.
Jæja, þá held ég bara við förum að loka þessu. Eins og ég segi, barinn er opinn, það er kaffi og te frammi. Ykkur er velkomin að koma og spjalla svo við Naomi. Og ég held að við bara gefa henni bara gott klapp.